Jag hälsar Alexandra Manson välkommen. Och du vill också gärna prata på engelska, men nu är ni upp över det här så att det är bara kör igång.
Welcome back after lunch, and thank you for having me today. My name is Alexandra Manson, and I work as a lighting designer at Today I will present my thesis topic, which was in hospital lighting. I also presented it at the Lighting Symposium in March of 2018. So it's called, very dramatically, Lighting for Survival, Prioritizing Architectural Lighting Design in the Healthcare Environment. Today I'm here to talk to you about the significant role that lighting design plays in building design. Specifically, I'm here to talk about architectural lighting design in the healthcare environment and to make a case for prioritizing architectural lighting design in the process. As this is a broad and extensive topic, I'd like to break it down into three parts. First and foremost, from a theoretical viewpoint, then a historical perspective, and finally, a look at some studies. The American Institute of Architecture says that health is a fundamental property of humanity, as expressed across a multitude of social, economic, and environmental indicators, all of which can be influenced directly through urban design and architecture. I'd like to add that lighting design can just as positively impact the healthcare environment in a number of ways if properly utilized. For example, lighting can give form to the built environment. It can impact the health of the hospital worker, the patient, and the building, not to mention the budget and the energy consumption factors that can even be utilized to create sustainable building practices. Before going any further, I'd like to give you a little bit of my background. I grew up in Vancouver, and it can be a very pretty city at some times. This is where I first became interested in how a building can positively or negatively affect a person's health. It is a really pretty city, except it usually looks like this. This is my Vancouver. Now, growing up, I grew up in a temperate rainforest climactic zone, and this is where I became adept at dealing with the effects of the wet and the damp. And wet and damp environments can manifest itself in many ways. One prominent effect is that the houses can easily become affected with black mold and perpetrate as one of the many symptoms of sick building syndrome.
Får jag bryta lite grann och fråga om vi kan få en ny mick till kvinnan? Det hörs så dåligt.
Okay, is that better? All right. Okay, perfect. Okay, so like I was saying, a building that has developed symptoms of mold can manifest itself with sick building syndrome. Now, in many different ways, this can have many complications. Unfortunately, my brother, it became very personal for us. My mother and my brother both developed very severe complications of their lungs from mold, and both nearly died. So this experience led me to study architecture at UBC in Vancouver. I became interested in how lighting design could play a role in shaping our built environment at KTH in Stockholm. All of my studying was effectively an attempt to understand how our built environment can potentially have an impact on our health and well-being. So now back to health and the built environment. The way I've come to understand the topic of health within architecture is that we as designers, architects, and building professionals need to step back and examine how we're creating our health environments. To me, this means we need to shift our perceptual method of viewing a hospital as another building, or another rectangle, or another box, just to fill with walls and furniture and people. Instead, we need to start seeing it as a healing environment, and then we can really start to understand what we are designing for. I think we've all been here. We feel sick, the light is too bright, all you can hear is the buzzing from the Ljus monitor overhead, and you possibly feel sicker than before when you arrived at the hospital. You are weak, paler, and perhaps greener than anyone should be. How is this typical hospital setting facilitating your healing? It really isn't. Hospitals are designed to hit 100% of the standards, and with my limited experience so far, they are supposed to do so by spending the least amount of money possible. To me, there is something missing in that picture, and that picture is seeing the hospital primarily as a healing environment rather than a target or a standard to hit. It seems to me that technology and also lighting design in the healthcare environment is constantly evolving, and that we exist in an exciting time in this field. Many professionals, such as yourself, are starting to understand the connection that designing a healthcare environment comes with the responsibility to ensure that the space being provided is a healthy, healing environment for those that work there and for those whose health is already compromised. What I hope to show you today is that lighting design is constantly evolving. Its role is constantly shifting, and it's our responsibility to guide this evolution of lighting to positively impact and influence our design decisions. Finally, it comes down to a measurable quantitative value. The impact of our decisions made in the planning stages can be measured in the quality of care one receives in the healthcare environment, in the quality of the built environment, and then the health outcomes of the patient, and in the long term, for the worker. At OF, we are returning to a more human-centric vision, new Nordic lighting. By prioritizing the user, our aim is to create designs that make the user as comfortable and productive as possible by rethinking our approach using humanistic principles and design led by research. For a hospital, this must function on many levels. We have social responsibilities, it has environmental responsibilities through energy consumption, and humanistic responsibilities through the provision of healing spaces and a healthy work environment. During my research, I came across a publication called Local Leaders, Healthier Communities Through Design. It stated that the medical system alone is unable to manage all the health threats, or rather responsibilities, and that just as we design resilience into our buildings, so must we design health into our buildings. What does that even mean? To me, designing health into our buildings means creating a healthy, healing environment. This refers to the health of the human body and the health of the built environment. When a building does not contribute to a healthful environment, a patient cannot be expected to heal at the optimum rate, nor the worker to perform at the optimal level of care, nor for the hospital to remain economically viable or environmentally sustainable. In the literature, there exists extensive theoretical writings on architecture design and the effect on society. It is a way to help us understand conceptually that a building is a series of interconnected parts, all of which have a profound effect on our natural biological processes, as well as our human spirit. Theory can influence the way we think creatively, as well as practically about the role of designer in the scales of urban planning, building design, and the quality of the spatial environment. Example, the hospital. A common metaphor is seeing our body as a building, or vice versa. Some, like Richard Neutra, feel that we need to make healthy bodies or buildings in order to survive, or to facilitate an effective healing environment. His main premise was called biorealism, and is essentially an architecture that integrates a fundamental knowledge of biology and behavioral science into the process of design. If the body can be seen as a metaphor for the healthcare environment, then artificial lighting can be seen as impacting the inanimate body as the daylight impacts the animate body. One cannot have an effective healing environment if the body, or if the building, is sick. Like this really nice diagram from Archigram, the hospital can be seen as situated in the urban tissue of the city, the way that the body is situated within the healthcare environment. What they are saying here is that the hospital has become symptomatic of the loss of control, both indirectly and directly as individual patients and citizens of the community. But how is this relevant to lighting design? Well, it's about the relationships our bodies have to the built environment, as ultimately becomes one of a loss of control once we enter the hospital. Once we become patients, our normative role in society changes. We give up our role as contributor and become dependent on others for survival. How we design for a space in a healthcare environment, how and what we specify for the lighting, good or good enough, can there be indicative of how we as a society see the function of a hospital and the role of the citizen within this space. The architecture and resulting lighting design determines the way our bodies and the way our buildings will function together. And therefore there exists a need to have a physiologically, biologically, and environmentally satisfying design process to facilitate the best possible outcomes for those in such an environment. As the body needs certain types of care to heal, the hospital also needs certain types of technological considerations in the planning phase to remain healthy and functioning in the operational phase. To summarize, the theory can help us understand the design process in such a way that is beyond the technical aspects of lighting. If the built environment can directly impact our health and the health of the environment, we need to be concerned with the evolution of lighting, the process of design, and the consequences of a decision after a hospital is built. Excuse From a conceptual understanding of hospitals and living, now we're going to move on to something a little bit more concrete. The use of natural light in hospitals has undergone a sort of cyclical transformation throughout its history. Prior to the mass introduction of artificial light for institutional buildings, around the early 1900s, the hospital utilized daylight as its primary means of illumination. Therefore, the history of the window is really the history of architecture, and that of the hospital. The hospital typology has undergone 6 major transformations, or waves of health architecture, as Vertebra and Fine call it. So as you can see, lighting design is not really a new profession. The ancient. The ancient was characterized by wellness care around 1000 BC to 100 AD by the ancient Egyptians, Greeks, and Middle Eastern cultures. This type of hospital utilized open-air sleeping bays and access to daylight. Religion, wellness, and nature operated in conjunction to form a holistic healing environment. During the medieval period, the Catholic Church rose as the most powerful provider of hospital care. Built on the edges of villages between the 5th and 13th centuries, the Catholic Church was responsible for the development of the urban hospital. The standard layout consisted of an open floor plan with tall stained glass windows and daylight as a primary light source. Each bed had access to the view of the nave, so that the sick could participate in Mass. These vast structures would actually become the origin of the modern medical center, and the great hospital model would prevail as a dominant typology. The Renaissance spanned from 1650 to the late 19th century. Adhering to the neoclassical style of architecture, the floor plans were characterized by symmetrical, axial configurations and regimented facades. The Hotel Dieu is characteristic of this period, with cramped, overcrowded conditions and poor ventilation. The causes of disease and infections was not yet understood, and an average of 1 out of every 4.5 patients died. 1850 to 1950 can be seen as the first implementation of truly modernist hospital planning principles. The revolutionary writings of Florence Nightingale were starting to have a major impact on the construction of modern hospitals in Europe. Nightingale proposed that the key to a successful recovery included plenty of fresh air and access to abundant natural light, or sanitary conditions as it was called. Her guidelines for hospital reform would influence the next 100 years of hospital planning in areas such as bed placement, ward size, ambiance, and window size, which, again, lighting design. The first known implementation of this style is in St. Thomas in London, and is also known as the pavilion style. The minimalist mega hospital. Electric lighting had only been developed for commercial use since the beginning of the 20th century, and is therefore a relative newcomer to the field of hospital design. Previous designs relied heavily on the utilization of natural light. After World War II, the minimalist mega hospital became an expression of the international style and reduced the hospital to its structural essence and allowed it to become a sheer container with volumetric machines for healing. Specialized departments have been formed in zones, and structural systems grew in size and spatial complexity, which meant a development of enormous block hospitals, of which we have a few in Stockholm and are working with today. It was during this era that attempts were made to design buildings almost entirely built on artificial light and infinite depth. With natural lighting excluded from the majority of the floor plans, the results can be seen as having some disastrous outcomes for health and well-being of the staff and the patients alike. When you structure the spatial planning around the machine rather than the patient, the mega hospital abandoned the more traditional methods of healthcare architecture to embrace only technological advancement. The problem, or the challenge, with designing in a mega hospital style is the complexity and the range of functions, processes, and emotions of which the hospital is expected to deal with. There is a danger in attempting to accommodate every type of function and every user, because the architecture becomes too sterile, too all-functioning, and just becomes an essential non-place. Today we are transitioning between the mega hospital and the virtual healthscape. The sixth wave can be seen as a reaction against the monolithic mega hospital and its provider-focused system. It is more characterized by a patient-centered approach and a focus on health and wellness culture. A health culture that sees the potential of the built environment as a supportive, restorative, or palliative contributor to health and well-being. As we are in a transitional period in hospital design, the decisions we make today will impact resource consumption, the amount of future environmental waste, and access to quality care for people needing medical treatment. To summarize, in the last century, the role of natural daylighting has been pushed aside in favor of a primary reliance on artificial lighting, and has only just begun to return to the curiosity of incorporating the health and environmental benefits of natural light. This shift has primarily occurred with the recognition of a biological importance of natural lighting in the healthcare environment. The over-reliance on artificial lighting as a main source of lighting can now seem to be at odds with the principles of health and healing. We need to incorporate both artificial and natural lighting when designing for a holistic environment that promotes the health and well-being of staff, patients, and visitors. Now that we've covered some theory, a design, and seen a short historical overview of the role of daylighting, it's time for a little quick overview of some studies which support lighting design as functioning as a pivotal design tool. As architectural lighting design exists within a business and social environment, it can also be a major contributor to sustainability and cost through smarter lighting design decisions and technological investments. Doing a cost-benefit analysis can help with evaluating short-term construction costs versus the total life cycle costs. This type of analysis can be done in all areas of the healthcare sector, from artificial systems, in order to determine health benefits for patient and workers, life cycle span of the hospital, aesthetics, and energy consumption factors. Evidence-based design is a fairly new, growing field of professionals committed to using a research-based approach to generate evidence, which then used to implement a systematic approach to design to obtain best case practices in healthcare design. This is more a common tool used in North America, but it's coming slowly to Europe a little bit more. It's focused specifically on healthcare design, and it's a collaborative effort in rethinking our approach to designing healthcare facilities and uses credible research and studies to obtain the best possible outcomes. You can take a course in this and become certified as an evidence-based designer as well. It's basically a collaboratory methodology in order to share post-occupancy evaluations so that those that design the healthcare environments can explore not only the successes, but also the important failures, so that we may all benefit from experiences to create the best possible hospitals. It's also been found that many of the improvements suggested by evidence-based design are only slightly more expensive in the initial construction costs than the traditional solutions. Therefore, well-informed designers and well-documented research is essential in improving our healthcare environment. An NHS study found that the quality of the visual environment of a hospital can significantly influence patient health outcomes and have a direct impact on the performance of the staff. Seeing that the average annual lighting costs are around 0.2% and the personnel costs are at 63%, it might be wise to find ways to maximize the performance and the quality of the luminous environment in order to enhance staff performance. Perhaps by utilizing daylight, we could create a more pleasant working and healing environment, stimulating the dynamic relationship between the buildings and its occupants. Now, if we take a look at the 40-year life cycle span, in the planning phase of the hospital design, we should be looking at the initial construction costs calculated against the life cycle cost of running the building. Taking into account the life cycle span of the hospital cannot be said to exceed 50 years without a reevaluation of the physical space and the technologies, we can also see how the total human factor can play a significant role. A huge portion of the life cycle costs are spent on staff. And so we should be assessing the impact the working environment has on the healthcare provider's efficiency, productivity, and job satisfaction, all of which incidentally contribute to patient outcomes. It is, in fact, the healthcare providers, not the patients, who constitute the most frequent user group. To paraphrase David Lamb, our inability to create delightful environments can result in direct, measurable economic consequences by not tapping into the full potential of worker productivity. Essentially, people are very expensive, lighting is cheap, and daylight is free. In theory, hospital lighting should strive to improve the healthcare environment for the worker and patient health. But we know this isn't always so. There are a few studies which show a link between building design, architectural lighting design, and the ability of our biological system to combat illness. We know that there are definite impacts on our circadian rhythms with the lack of light, or conversely, too much light. That being said, taking into consideration the impact of light on our biological processes while designing in the healthcare environment may reduce the occurrence of SAD, sleeping disorders, stress, and among other serious diseases. You remember how cheap the lighting costs were. A few quick studies on lighting effects to think about. A Cleveland nursing clinic found that most hospital rooms are lit dimly throughout the day, with most rooms being lit at about 100-150 lux. It was found that the patient's circadian rhythms were thrown off by too little exposure to bright light during the day, which meant that there was a need for more pain medication, and an increase in depression, stress, and anxiety was reported than those who had access to normal levels of daylight exposure. This means that lighting can influence the levels of hormonal stress by affecting melatonin production in the body, which means more susceptibility to pain and depression. A study by Brainard and Glickman have also found that excessive bright light exposure can have an acute stimulatory effect on us, and exposure during our normal night has been proposed and preliminarily linked to the development of increased breast cancer in night shift workers. This is believed to be caused due to the suppressive effects of nocturnal lighting on melatonin production. This is my favorite study, and then we can end on a positive note. Ulrich's classic 1984 study, View Through the Window May Influence Recovery from Surgery. It shows that natural views, daylight, and a connection to the outside environment are all beneficial to a patient's recovery. It seems Florence Nightingale was onto something. So this question keeps coming back, but how will we evolve in the healthcare environment? As I said before, designing in the healthcare environment comes with the responsibility to ensure that the space provided is a healthy, healing environment for those whose health is already compromised and for those who must work there. Therefore, the role of architectural lighting design is to constantly evolve, to seek out the best care practices in lighting design, and to push for incorporating more humanistic factors. As studies show, if we can alter the health of a worker or a patient, it becomes fundamental to alter it in a positive way rather than a negative. Our current reality is that we exist in a transitional period in hospital architecture. It is clearly recognized that there is a need to return to a more human-centric version of the hospital, but much of the existing infrastructure is rooted in the mega hospital transition. After all, it's a question of what we want and desire in terms of our hospital environments, our healing environments, and our working environments. We as lighting designers need to find a way to make positive healthcare experiences with lighting design become the rule rather than the exception. Would you rather have your machines for healing or your room with a view? That's it.